Hello and good afternoon or good morning, regardless of where you're joining me from today. I'm very pleased to be able to present to you during this ARC convention here in Virginia Beach, 2022. I will be going through a series of developmental milestones and what some of the delays might look like, and what are some interventions that we can offer to help families cope with some of the emotional outbursts and emotional dysregulation, usually consistent with kids who are having some developmental delays. But first, a brief introduction. Let me go ahead and share my screen so you guys can see the presentation. I am a Dr. Janice Keener. I am a psychologist in the Department of Developmental Pediatrics at CHKD, and I'm very pleased to be joining everyone today. Okay, so goals for today's presentation: identifying key points in development where intervention and supports can be helpful. I will be reviewing developmental milestones, and one of my colleagues, Dana Buck, will also be discussing that during her presentation, which is on Wednesday. So I won't go into as much detail as Dana. I will just briefly touch on the milestone and then some interventions we can recommend at that time. The pictures of these little guys are my two kiddos. I'll be referencing them throughout the video as well. The learning objectives. First, like I said, briefly review what a developmental delay may look like. Intervention examples, both medical and therapeutic. What can be done at home to help with these challenging behaviors? All right. So major areas of development, we have cognitive or problem-solving areas. Then within the language domain, we have receptive and expressive language skills. Then we also have to look at social and emotional development. And then finally, we have motor skills, which include gross motor, which is those big muscles, and fine motor, which is other small hand muscles. And adaptive functioning, so the ability to take care of oneself, daily self-help skills. Okay, so what is a developmental delay? Defined, it's when a child's progression through predictable developmental phases slows, stops, or reverses. Symptoms can include slower than normal development of motor, cognitive, social, and emotional skills. All right, a baby may have a birth defect that interferes with his development, causing him to progress in fits and starts, meeting some milestones on time and others much later. Some children develop normally for 5 months or even years, but then they start to falter with development slowing down, stopping, and sometimes even regressing or going backwards. And as I noted earlier, Ms. Buck will review some of the developmental milestones in her presentation as well. All right, typical development. This descriptive term refers to development which is occurring out of the normal sequence, or which is characterized by behavior which is not usually seen in normally developing children. It can also be applied to behavior which is consistently exaggerated beyond that which is seen in typically developing children. Just a brief example. All kids have tantrums and they seem to last forever. I have a 13-year-old who has what I like to now call slight meltdowns, but they're tantrums, right? So we want to then look at, is the tantrum bigger or exaggerated than what we would typically expect to see in children, which is more common in kids who are in those toddler years. So an example of atypical development out of normal sequence. A 3-year-old who reads letters, even some words, hyperlexia, but yet they do not use any language to communicate with others. So oftentimes these youngsters who can read, they're actually not able to comprehend what they're reading. So their comprehension is way below what their reading level actually is. And then people will often make the mistake to assume that they are in fact able to to communicate or have conversations because they're able to read, but that is not necessarily the case in some of these youngsters. Not typically seeing coprophagia, which is when child is eating his own bowel movement, and exaggerated behavioral responses, which is what I briefly touched upon earlier, severe or prolonged temper tantrums, which can include harm to self, others, or property, or just having a really difficult time self-regulating. Okay, so why is it important to identify delayed and atypical development? Why do we care? Okay, it helps us understand why the child acts differently. When I often talk to our families in clinic and give them some of these diagnoses, I like to explain to them that it helps us give a framework or a platform for common language. So rather than saying Johnny's being lazy or Johnny's being obstinate or what have you, it gives us a common language to describe and help explain why some of these behaviors may be occurring. It helps us to adjust our expectation of the child's behavior and functional capacity, right? So if we have a child whose adaptive functioning is 2 to 3 years younger than their chronological age, it wouldn't be fair to expect him or her to behave, let's say they're 9, to behave like a 9-year-old when their actual capacity is that of a 5 or 6-year-old. It allows for referral to intervention services. I'm sure you all have been hearing this throughout the conference, the importance of early intervention, getting these kids seen early and getting them connected with services early is really, really critical. This may also lead to identifying a medical, neurologic, or genetic problem as the cause of the developmental difference. So rather than just saying, oh, they're talking slowly, we'll just give them some time, we need to actually understand what is going on. Is it simply just a language delay, or could it be that there's some other underlying condition occurring? If a genetic disorder is identified, this will allow the parents to receive genetic counseling regarding the recurrence risk should they choose to have more children. What are some of the common causes for a delayed or atypical development? So we have non-specific multifactorial causes such as a learning disability, intellectual disability, and autism spectrum disorder. We don't have a clear understanding of why this child may have these behaviors. It's a multifactorial reason, correct? Premature birth. Neurologic conditions such as cerebral palsy or spina bifida. Genetic conditions, Down syndrome, Fragile X syndrome. Teratogens, fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. And then we have sensory problems, so deaf, hard of hearing, and vision disturbances. All right, I think this is a really important point. How common are some developmental disabilities? So a kind of just generic, broad developmental delay, currently the CDC reports, is seen in 1 out of 6 children. Intellectual disability, they broke it down by different age groups. So about 0.73% in children 3 to 7 years of age. And remember that we don't actually diagnose an intellectual disability . Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. Okay. So now we were talking about the occurrence in developmental disabilities. So we talked about the delay and then intellectual disability. Remember that we don't actually diagnose an intellectual disability until the child is closer to 7, 8 years of age, all right? So then we look at children ages 8 to 12 years. It's about 1.45% of the population. And then children ages 13 to 17 years, it's about 1.40%. All right, autism spectrum disorder, the current CDC reports 1 out of 44 children have been diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. Down syndrome, we have 1 out of 700 children. Fragile X syndrome is divided up between males and females. For males, we have 1 out of 4,000 males, and females 1 out of 7,000. Cerebral palsy, 3.6 out of 1,000. Children born deaf or hard of hearing, about 2 to 3 for every 1,000 live births. Children born with blindness, 2 to 3 out of 100,000 live births. All right, normal development in a 6-month-old. They're for GM is gross motor. They're rolling over, they're sitting. Cognitive, they reach, and fine motor, put that together. They reach and grasp at objects. They are able to transfer one object from one hand to the other, and they're doing some oral exploration. Language, they're babbling, laughing, blowing raspberries, turning towards a sound or voice. This is really important. When a caregiver walks into a room and starts just talking aloud to the baby or just talking aloud in general, we really want to see if the child orients to a voice, right? Do they hear, oh, there's something there? Are they aware that there's someone else in the room talking? Are they orienting to that sound? If they're not, again, I'll talk about this in a little bit. If they're not, then we start having some concerns about hearing loss or a potential developmental delay. Social, so again, the visual regard. Are they able to make eye contact and laugh with another person? Are they smiling? Are they showing enjoyment of social interactions? Do they get excited to play, tickle monster, recognizing familiar faces? What do we do if milestones aren't being met, and how to help further their development? First, I really encourage parents, make a list of concerns prior to each well child visit. As parents, we get super busy, but we have this lovely thing called the phone that has a notes section. And I am very well known for writing down, just jotting down quick thoughts. I could put it in a notebook, but I probably would misplace the notebook. I don't misplace my phone. So write it down on your phone and say, I'm worried Johnny is not making raspberries, or Johnny's not looking at me when I walk into a room, or whatever that it is, so that when it comes time for the appointments are often quick. Physicians have very short time slots. They need to get through a lot of those important checkboxes for the well child visit. So you want to make sure as a parent that you're able to ask the relevant questions. And if you don't have them written down, I probably would forget them. So that's where it's important to write things down. I'm a very big proponent in talking aloud to your children. They are always listening, for better or worse, right? So as you're driving and you see a beautiful cherry blossom, make sure you point it out. Point that with your fingers. Sally, look at that tree, or look at that bird, or whatever that it is. As you're walking through the grocery store, pick up a peach, pick up an apple, whatever it might be, and point it out to them. Really start to label and narrate objects in their environment. And you would be amazed at the synaptic connections that start to occur. And read board books. At this age, you would start with a board book. Children's attention spans, yes, they're very, very short. I can remember the first time I started reading to my 13-year-old. He was very, very little. I don't think he was even 3 months old. And when he was 6 months old, he definitely wouldn't sit still for an entire board book. But I would just do 2 pages and then keep reading while we were taking our bath, just so they get used to hearing your voice, pointing out pictures in the book, doing that predictability of, oh, what might happen next? What's the, in Goodnight Moon, for example, I love, where are they going to go next? What's the next adventure that's going to occur? So it's really, really important. All right, so now we're jumping ahead to the 12-month period. By now, typically gross motor, they stand, they cruise, they may walk. This doesn't mean that if at 12 months, Johnny is not standing or walking, that we should sound the alarms. No, it just means that we need to keep an eye that between 12 to 14 months, they should be starting to do some of these behaviors. That also means that you need to make sure your home is safe, because kids really start to grab things that we do not want them to be grabbing, right? All right, cognitive and fine motor, the 2-finger pincer grasp. So using those little fingers to grab a Cheerio, to grab You know, anything that's small for we need to be careful, right? Because a lot of times they'll put these small objects into their mouth. It's important that we start to see them use the fine motor skills. Grab a block and release a block into a cup. Make a mark with a crayon. We're not asking for Picasso work here. We're just seeing if they're able to start to do some coloring. Okay, so there's a lot on this slide. I'm aware of this. I'll try to go quickly, but I think it's important to reiterate what we need to be seeing between 12 and 18 months, right? There are some wonderful resources that Dana Buck will be talking about during her presentation, but the CDC has put out some wonderful, also apps for your phones where you can kind of track where the development is. For language, are they responding to no? Of course, the child's main job is to disagree with you when you say no, right? But are they at least alerting to you say no in a stern voice? Are they stopping their behavior they shouldn't be doing, like sticking their finger in the electric outlet? Do they use oh, you know, maybe shrug their shoulders when they're not, when they know they did something they weren't supposed to? Are they trying to imitate words? In the problem-solving realm, are they exploring objects in many ways? That's throwing, dropping things, shaking things, banging things. Are they really using all those muscles and kind of exploring the world in their way? Gross motor, are they able to sit without assistance by 12 months? Are they pulling themselves up to stand and cruising along on the furniture? Fine motor, we talked about, pincer grasp, taking objects out of containers and putting it back in, and letting objects go voluntarily. Oftentimes people talk about how kids don't really need fancy toys at this age. You could literally just give them a big Tupperware with small Tupperwares and have them dump the items in and out, and they would be happy as clams with that. Socially, okay, how do they behave with strangers? If you go to Target and someone says, oh my gosh, look at how cute your shirt is, or what have you, how do they respond? Do they cry? Do they shy away? Do they sometimes smile? Really pay attention to those social interactions. Do they enjoy imitating people in play? And what we mean by that is, you know, are they imitating you guys as you're, you know, mixing in a bowl or shaving or pretending to mow a lawn or, you know, feed baby by feeding their baby doll? What are they doing to engage in that imitative play? And then are they starting to show a specific preference for certain people or toys, right? So now we're jumping to 18 months. They should be saying several single words. We really want to see, are they shaking their head for no and nodding for yes, as well as saying some of those things? Are they pointing out items that they want or items to show interest, like, you know, pointing at the cereal box that's up on the counter? Are they pointing at their water cup? Are they really using that single point? And also integrating eye contact. So in fact, what we mean by integrating is looking at mom or dad or auntie or whomever's in the home to help out while they point. And that is kind of, it's called social referencing. So we want to make sure that they're looking at the caregiver as they're pointing to make sure that everything is nicely integrated. Problem solving. They can follow one-step verbal command without any gestures. For example, will they sit down when you say sit down? Grab the ball, point to their nose or their knees or their feet. Point to get the attention of others, like older siblings. Gross motor, they may be walking alone, pulling toys while walking. They may walk up and down steps. Fine motor skills, can they drink from a cup? Can they use a spoon? Social, we're talking about liking to hand things to others as play. So giving someone else a toy doll or a stuffy, giving someone else a Lego block, one of those big Duplo blocks, to try to engage in play. And then showing affection for familiar people. Just because they don't show affection doesn't mean we need to sound the alarms, but are they showing kind of, like, let's say they were to fall down and get hurt. Do they seek do they seek someone out in comfort to help make them feel better? So again, what do we do if milestones aren't being met, and how do we help further their development? Again, bring in your list of concerns to the pediatrician appointment. If it's the same concerns that you had at the 6-month visit, For example, if you were concerned at 6 months that Johnny wasn't babbling, blowing raspberries, or alerting to sound of voice when walking into a room, you can definitely ask your pediatrician for a referral to speech therapy or ask questions about accessing early intervention. Attend library reading and activity groups. I cannot stress enough how much of an underutilized resource I believe libraries truly are. Libraries have amazing groups for young kids, older kids, and adults. And if you're able to attend a weekday class, great. They even have weekend classes for folks who work. It's a great opportunity to be able to be with other caregivers and other children of the same age. So you can start to build relationships, but also expose kids to some same age peers. And again, continue to narrate to your child. I know I often sound like a broken record to our families talking about reading. And believe me, when I tell you that I know the end of the day is exhausting, I 100% understand that. Just set aside 10, 15 minutes and read, and you will be shocked at the development that happens in your child. And if you can't do 15, 20 minutes, fine, do 5. If your child can't sit for a whole board book, that's okay too. But by the time they're close to 4, they should be able to sit for about a 10-minute book. So that's also a good gauge of how is their development progressing? Are they in fact able to pay attention to when they're being read to? Even if your child is running around the room, but occasionally comes over to where you're reading to point at, the animal or whatever they see in the book, that's great. They're paying attention. Okay, developmental milestones. This is my little guy at Disney. Clearly, I'm a big Disney fan. So language, pointing to things or pictures when they are named. So we should be starting to see some nice labeling occurring. Say brief sentences with 2 to 4 words. I want milk, I want play, I want nap, go potty, things like that. For problem solving, we're beginning to see some sort shaping occurring and starting to see some coloring, playing simple make-believe games, like pretending to feed the baby doll or pretending to make the jets fly or the superheroes fly, what have you. And now following 2-step instructions, such as pick up your shoes and put them in the closet. You may need to repeat it a couple times. You may need to model it a couple times, but they should start to follow some simple instructions. Gross motor, kicking a ball, throwing a ball underhand, a big ball. We're not saying little baseballs yet. Standing on their tiptoes, throwing a ball overhand, but again, a bigger ball. Fine motor. By 24 months, they should start to copy some circles and lines. So you draw a circle on a paper, your turn. You guys take turns. You model what you're trying to see. You draw a line, they draw a line. String up to 4 blocks. A lot of people maybe don't have blocks you can put on a string, but maybe we can focus on stacking blocks then. Socially, are they copying other children, adults as well? Are they imitating some of those behaviors? They should be playing mainly beside other children, parallel play, but they're starting to include other children, such as in chase games or tag or duck, goose, things like that. And then getting excited when they see other children. If some of these behaviors aren't occurring, again, this is a great opportunity to talk with your pediatrician. Typically during the 18-month visit and the 24-month visit, they will do a brief questionnaire called the MCHAT, which is a question that looks at autism-specific questions. But it wouldn't just be autism that we would be concerned about, right? We want to look at, are they talking? What are the motor skills looking like? And then it does look at some of those social components as well. All right, 2 years old. Go up and down the stair 1 step at a time, jumping, throwing the ball overhand like we mentioned. Cognitive, stacking blocks, stacking up to 6 blocks, turning a single page in a paper book without ripping it gently, imitating a horizontal stroke with a crayon, imitative play. Language, we should have about 50 words at this point, using brief 2-word phrases and following a 2-step request. Social, again, we mentioned parallel play, a transitional object, asking parent to read a book. And then adaptive, they can remove some clothing. So at about 2, they should be able to pull up and down some shorts or some pants with an elastic band, slip on some shoes. Socks can be difficult, buttons can be too. Taking off a shirt can often be easier than putting on a shirt. But if we're having a hard time putting on clothes or shoes, period, this is a good opportunity to ask for an occupational therapy request. A good colleague and friend of mine, Dr. Corey Yates, presented as well. And we do have some overlap in what we talk about with sensory integration and being able to do some of these tasks, which is fine motor tasks. So that would be a great presentation to listen to as well. All right, normal development. Okay, at 3 years old, sorry. Gross motor, are they pedaling a tricycle, going up and down the stairs, alternating feet? Are they able to draw a simple person? So 2 parts. I'm no Picasso, so I'm very careful whenever I say this to people, but are they able, it's more looking at the concept of, can they draw a tree? Can they draw a person? Can they draw a face and a body? Copy circle, they're doing some more imaginative play with themes or storylines. This might look like a tea party. This might look like going on a picnic or a more involved script with action heroes, things like that. With their language, they're speaking complete sentences with mostly clear articulation, conversation with 2 to 3 sentences per turn. They can name and describe use of some common objects like cup, ball, and crayon. Socially, they enjoy interactive play. They can identify themselves as a boy or girl correctly, or at least starting to understand, differences, boys and girls, and naming a friend. Adaptive, toilet training for daytime and bowel and bladder. This is a little bit more of a fluid skill, if I might say so. I think by 3, we should start seeing some interest in looking or using the toilet, but that doesn't mean that by 3.5, they're going to have all these skills achieved. A lot of times kids will have daytime bladder control achieved, but at nighttime doesn't happen until closer to 4.5 or 5, which is fine. Oops, sorry. All right, behavior challenges that can arise and what to do. A child has a delayed language and they have a tantrum. Severe emotional dysregulation, and they can act out aggressively. I'm going to briefly show you a video of my son when he was, I think this video is about 2.5 years old. So bear with me for 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing real quick. Oops. Oh, no, I can do a new share. Never mind. Here's the video. Okay. Okay, and then let me show you the other video that I have. Oopsie. Okay, so my reason that I thought it would be helpful to see these videos is because when we're looking at tantrums and we're looking at a delayed language, a lot of the issues that occur is if a child knows what he wants in his head and he can't express it to you, you're going to keep battling with him. And for me, I knew that he needed to go potty and I wanted him to go potty and he was refusing to go potty. I know there must have been another reason why he didn't want to try the potty and watch TV first, but that inability to express himself verbally was causing him such distress that that particular tantrum lasted a good 15 minutes. He didn't get aggressive or throw anything, but you can see the amount of distress that he's experiencing. The second tantrum that I showed you, I honest to goodness had no idea what was upsetting him. He kept running into different parts of the house and hiding. And I knew he was really upset. I was trying desperately to figure out what was going on. But the fact that he knew, so his receptive language was much more advanced than his expressive language, right? His ability to understand and comprehend what you're asking, much more advanced than what he's able to actually verbally say. And so he was distressed. He wanted something, and I could not figure out what it was. I followed him by video just because I thought it was interesting to see what was distressing him. And he was currently at that time in occupational therapy with Dr. Yates, as well as speech therapy to try to help these behaviors. And he was in a combination of speech and OT at the same time to help figure out some of the sensorial issues he was having, as well as the expressive language. All right, time out. I love Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, which is where I did my internship, has these beautiful handouts. I believe they're available on their website still. What are some things you can do when your child is misbehaving, regardless if there is an identified developmental delay or not? One of the options is timeout. I know that's a fan favorite. What I do also see a lot of times is that parents and caregivers often don't do timeout correctly, which can lead to worse tantrums and worse behaviors. So if your child is 4, we're not going to have them sit in a bathroom for 12 minutes with the door closed. That's scary. That's not going to lead to the behaviors we want to try to stop and help out. So really figure out, is it that the child needs a timeout or the toy needs a timeout? Every child operates differently. So if the child, let's say Johnny's playing with an airplane and he keeps crashing the airplane into his brother, which is causing a big fight, I would say that maybe the toy needs a timeout, and you can set it on top of the refrigerator somewhere high up and set it, if he's 4 again or 5, set the timer for 5 minutes where he can actually see his airplane, but know that the airplane needs a timeout. And then if they have the appropriate language, you can ask them, what do you think you did wrong? What was going on, right? Now, if the child needs a timeout because they're misbehaving, sometimes the children find it much more punitive to be removed from whatever the family is doing and to be alone. It can cause some other sorts of distress. Maybe they have fears of being alone or being away from the family. And I will often encourage a parent or a caregiver to sit with the child in timeout. This does not mean that you engage. It means that you pick either sit on the staircase, go sit in a quieter room. I think the bedroom probably should be off limits for timeout, because then you're going to make the association of naughty behavior. Your bedroom is a bad place to be. So that creates other issues. So maybe if there's a family room or a sitting room or somewhere where there's a little bit more of a quiet space, you can go and sit with them and put the timer. I'm very big on visuals. So if you're 6 years old, you're going to sit there with me for 6 minutes and we're not going to talk. After the 6 minutes, the timer goes off, then we have a conversation. Very big on getting onto the child's level. Don't talk from up there and the child be down there. Get down to your knees and talk to them in the eyes. Meet them where they're at and explain, it wasn't very nice how you were hitting your sister. What are some other things we can do? And I'll talk more about taking care of yourself as a parent or a caregiver in a little bit, but really you have to find out what type of timeout intervention works best for you as a family. And then be consistent. So if mom is going to do one thing and dad's going to do one thing, and then grandma or grandpa, whomever else is watching the child doing a different thing, that's not going to work. That's going to be very, very confusing. So we want to make sure that we're all doing the same behavior. Intervention. Common problems with timeout. I think I mentioned this a second ago. Be consistent Get your child to the timeout place quickly. They have very short attention spans. If you wait an hour, they're going to have no idea what they did to warrant this timeout, right? So as soon as the behavior occurs, we're going to stop what we're doing and go to timeout. For toddlers, pick them up from behind to prevent them biting, hitting, or kicking you. And do not set the timer until your child is calm. So what's important to figure out is, how do we calm the child? Not every child is born with the ability to self-soothe. That can go back to some of the developmental delays we were talking about earlier. And again, I'll mention some techniques in a little bit, but we need to make sure that they're calm. And timeout should not be over until the child sits quietly for their minutes without yelling or screaming and without kicking or trying to get away. If they leave before the timeout is over, then you put your child back in timeout until the timer rings. If timeout leads to a struggle or does not work, we can always problem solve as to a different way to intervene with the child. Okay, behavior charts, super big on behavior charts, but I just wanted to show you guys some different ways that we can do behavior charts. So the first one here, the little ladybug. Oh, so let me back up. First, you should identify what's the prize. If the child is motivated by little matchbox cars, or motivated by stickers, or something small. I'm not a big fan of using candy as a reward, but whatever you think would work for your kiddo. Then whenever they are caught being good, which I'll explain in a second, you would color in the little ladybug's little petals here. And once you get the whole ladybug colored in, you get your prize. So I'm a big proponent of catch them being good. Charles Barkley wrote an excellent book on ADHD about this, where as parents with kids who have behavior challenges or developmental delays, we focus on no, when they're doing something wrong. But the child doesn't often hear good job or praise for a good behavior. So you catch them being good. Great job playing with your sister, even if it's only for 2 seconds. Great job putting your milk cup away. Great job getting your shoes on. And they really start to fluff up and feel proud. And they're more likely to engage in those behaviors again if you comment on them, no matter how brief they might be. And then you can give them the desired reward or decided upon reward. But again, everything you do with a child, especially, the up to 6, 7 years, has to be immediate. You can't the next day say, oh, you did such a good job putting away your toys. They're not going to have any idea what happened yesterday. They don't even know what they had for breakfast the same day. So another behavior chart, helping the froggy get to his pond. I think a lot of times kids like to see something fun, the froggy's hopping, and they're more maybe apt to get involved. Behavior charts like this. So this is probably for a little bit older of a child, where you're trying to help them understand a daily routine. We make our bed, we brush our teeth, you wash your own dish, draw a picture, whatever it is that you want to do. Big on visuals. I actually prefer to do a visual chart with a picture of my child doing the behavior. So when I want to see my child learn to brush his teeth on his own, I take a picture of the steps, of the various steps involved in brushing the teeth, put it up on a little laminated paper, and they can check off as they do each one. I have families that have kids who are 15 and have intellectual disability, and they're still not able to shower independently. And that's a really important life skill we want to teach our youngsters, right? But sometimes the steps can be a little confusing. So what should we do? You can laminate a shower organizer. You can actually stick it in the shower, because the bath, laminated papers can get wet. And that way they can follow, wet my body, put shampoo, put soap in all my parts, rinse off, put shampoo in my hair, scrub in, however it is that you want to do it, but you can work on it. You talk it through before they start showering. And then maybe the first few times you walk them through it as they're showering independently. And then you can step out of the bathroom and slowly kind of progress with them, letting them do that on their own. What to do during a tantrum? I always say, don't devise a new strategy during a tantrum. It's kind of like when someone tells you to calm down while you're really upset. That's not going to help, is it? If you look at those wonderful yogi people who do fantastic meditation, they practice their meditative skills constantly. This isn't something that they will randomly do on a whim, right? They're doing it throughout the day, every day, so that they're able to call upon those skills in a time of distress. Same thing happens with the child. You need to practice or figure out with them together, what can we do to help you calm down when you're upset? I'm a huge proponent of coping toolkits. I like to put, you know what, I'm going to grab something and show you guys real quick. So when I'm doing a coping kit, we figure out with parents and kids, okay, do you like to have like a little push ball like this? Do you like to have a squeezy ball like this? Is it better for you to work on toys that you can move around independently? Let's see what we have here. Some of these little interactive blocks, things like that, okay? So you develop a coping toolbox, and I am very visual. I will actually get a treasure box, or get a little toolbox, whatever it might be, and then we do that together. We figure out what can we put in there to help you calm down. Bubbles are a huge one. Not only watching the bubbles blow away, but also breathing with bubbles. I put breathing with balloons, though I know balloons can be tough with latex. So I'm a big believer in blowing with bubbles. You in through your nose and out with your mouth, and you see the bubbles come out. That's teaching you to A, deep breathe, to calm down, and B, you get to see a lovely bubble display. Dr. Corey Yates talked about deep squeezes, I'm sure. Kids who get dysregulated and adults oftentimes don't know how to calm themselves down. So they may respond well to doing a deep squeeze approach from the head, having them stand in front of you, from the head where you squeeze tightly, to the shoulders, to the arms, to their sides, to their thighs, to their calves, all the way down to their feet. And you slowly do that as they're calming down. Get down to your child's eye level. There is nothing more powerful for a child than having their caregiver or parent looking at them at their level and talking to them in a calm voice. The last one I mentioned earlier was going to talk about keep yourself calm. It is so hard as a parent when you have 1,000 things going on and your child is having a tantrum for you to also be calm. But a child can sense when you're distressed. So if you're yelling at them to calm down or get your bubbles, how responsive are they going to be? Not very. And it's very interesting. There's research that supports if you're able to talk in a quieter voice, almost like a whisper, by nature, the other person will start to talk quieter too. It's very hard to yell when someone is whispering to you. Try the technique, see how it works. I guarantee you'll be pleasantly pleased. Amazon, as always, great resources for kids things and adult things, but the Yogi deck is one of my favorites. You can put that in your coping kit and the kiddo can grab a yoga pose. They're kid friendly from the Yogi kit. And when they're getting upset, they can go do a yoga pose and calm down. The book Yoga for Little Kids is wonderful. But again, these are all things I want you to work on when everyone is calm and in a happy place. And the toolkit should be kept somewhere that's visible. And you can refer to it like, you know, Johnny, I'm starting to see you're getting upset. Let's go ahead and calm down for a bit and find something in your coping kit that will help you, right? It is age dependent. You can't really tell a 4-year-old maybe to do that. Maybe give them 2 things to choose from. The other thing that's really important is kids need to feel, and like adults, we need to feel like we have some locus of control. So if you're going to dictate to them how to calm down, that's not going to work well. But if you pick 2 items that you think are most likely going to help them, you will probably see much better results quicker. All right. So tons of resources. Some of these are similar to what Dr. Yates gave you, I believe, but so resources for sensory processing differences. The Sensory Processing Diagnosis Foundation.net has fantastic resources. But the books that I really like, The Out of Sync Child Has Fun, wonderful book that explains what an out of sync child is. So a child who maybe has a hard time regulating their emotions and syncing or engaging with other kids. Sensory integration in the child, very important. I think it has a great resource for parents. Learn to Move, I think, and Move to Learn is fantastic because for parents and teachers and kids, because it teaches us that not everyone can sit in a chair for an hour and listen to a lecture. I, for example, had to stand up to go get those little fidget toys because I needed to move around myself, right? So Learn to Move and Move to Learn helps you figure out, okay, what do we do for our bodies to help regulate so we can attend better to what's going on? Which leads me to the next set of resources for emotion regulation. For Little Tempers, a Feel Better book for little tempers, wonderful book about how to calm yourself when you're feeling upset. I always recommend to families that you read the book first on your own and then read them to your child together. This next one I love, How to Be a Superhero Called Self-Control. Fantastic book. Listening to My Body is a great one. Big Deals is a fantastic book as well. All right. So I'm just going to finish with 4-year-old and 5-year-old developmental milestones, but I kind of stopped with the milestones to start giving you some interventions that I think are helpful from ages 3 and above. Some of the other ones like the bubbles and deep breathing and the squeezes, you can do it too, but they may not cognitively understand to resort to those later on. So at about 4, we expect to see clear speech, understandable, reciprocal conversation. They could sing a song, like a nursery rhyme, or recite a poem from memory. Socially, they generally act appropriate for the family's cultural values. They listen to stories. They're aware of their gender, their self, and others, and they play board or card games. Again, there's always some fluidity within some of these domains, but for the most part, this is what we typically see. For adaptive functioning at about 4 years old, they should be able to brush their own teeth. I still say with supervision, but have a little bit more kind of ownership over their hygiene and dressing themselves. Some kids may still have a hard time with buttons and zippers. They may still need some help. If you see that they're really, really struggling, you may want to ask for an occupational therapy referral. Oh, and then we have hopping on a foot and balancing briefly. And then buttons draws a person with 3 parts and doing more fantasy play. At 5 years old, they can be able to tell a simple story with full sentences, name more than 4 colors, count to 10. They're able to separate easily from parent. That's not to say that maybe the first few days of school, they may have a hard time, but eventually they're able to calm down and go to school. One thing that I love to do with kids who have a hard time separating is a transitional object. It can be something as simple as like a little stone or one of the fidget toys that you okay with the teacher, but that you give to Johnny when he heads off to school. And whenever he gets sad or scared, he can rub that little toy and think of you and think of their caregiver, make them feel better. Also, The Kissing Hand, a fantastic book about a little raccoon who goes off to kindergarten and is quite scared to be alone. So mommy kisses his hand, and whenever he gets scared or sad, he holds his hand up to his cheek and he starts to calm down. This works wonders for this age group. Adaptive functioning, dress and undress with minimal assistance. They're able to hop a little bit better and balance using a 2-wheel bike with training wheels, drawing a person and attend to a task for 20 minutes or more. Delays. So at 12 months, if they're not sitting or crawling, we have some concerns. If at 18 months they're not walking, that's a concern and ask for a referral. 4 years old, can't pedal tricycle, again, we have some concerns. If they're not finger feeding by 14 months, that's a concern. Not able to use a spoon to eat by 24 months. Not able to turn a paper page in a book by 3 years. And then not able to imitate vertical, horizontal, or circular strokes with a pencil or crayon by 36 months. And then can't draw a person by 4 years. Cognitively, language delay, behavior problems, no imitative play by 2.5 years, and unable to draw a simple person by 4 years. We have some concerns. And no interest in books by 2 years. Cannot match sounds to pictures of animals by 3 years. They don't understand the difference between big, like opposites, big, little, long, short, soft, hard by about 4 years. Consistently fails to respond to sound at any age. Behavior problems again, no single words by 16 months. No spontaneous phrases by 2 years. We get some concerns there. Not speaking a short sentences by 36 months. An adult is able to understand 75% of speech by 36 months and 100% speech by 4 years. And then can't recall a familiar story from a book by about 4 years. And not able to follow a 3-step command by 5. Or name all primary colors by 5. Socially, we talked about these. No responsive smile, doesn't point for his needs, doesn't point to show or share by 24 months, does not bring a toy or a book to parent to share, doesn't take turns or play interactively with other children by 3 years, and doesn't help to clean up by 4 years, and doesn't try to have some friends or some consistent social interaction. Adaptive, again, we worry about being able to dress themselves and undress themselves in a timely fashion. So while we discussed oral exploring at 6 months, by 2 years of age, we shouldn't be seeing oral exploring, and not able to dress or wash their own hands by 4, not independent toilet use by 4. Again, that's a little bit more fluid and flexible, I would say. By 4 years, they should be at least able to use the toilet for daytime and show interest. Nighttime may be a little bit later. We care a lot about social interaction, social reciprocity. That's their job, is to play, right? Impaired joint attention, being able to go back and forth with you as their caregiver. Poor or absent eye contact, not well integrated. Preoccupation with unusual objects or with parts of an object might be something of a concern. A marked restricted range of interest or sensory aspects of objects versus functional use of objects. So focusing more on the plane propeller than actually making the plane fly, right? Rigid need for routine or sameness. Marked difficulty modulating emotional response to specific stimuli. These are most often characterized by autism, some of these atypical development signs or concerns. So again, looking at impaired interactive play, lack of interest in others, frequent engagement in repetitive behavior, persistent or excessive echolalia, that's repetition of oneself or others, strong letter or number recognition in the absence of normal language skills. So again, going back to the hyperlexia, where the child is able to name all numbers and letters and words that they're reading, but they can't have a conversation with you. Oops, sorry. Some of these kids may have lost developmental skills, and this is an opportunity to talk to your pediatrician for referral to a specialist. What do you do if there is a delayed or atypical development suspected? Discuss the concerns with their healthcare provider and discuss if they feel it's appropriate to be referred to a developmental pediatrician. Also ask about an assessment for a special education preschool evaluation that can happen at about 2.5 years of age, and maybe consider if they may benefit from an IEP. If the child's under 3 years of age, you can refer them to the Infant and Toddler Connection of Virginia. And if they're over 2.5, we would refer to their local public school. And this is just a little handout from the Infant and Toddler Connection of Virginia that talks about how to get a hold of them for a in-home evaluation. These are the phone numbers for the areas around here for resources for Infant and Toddler Connection. And more information about early childhood special education. A lot of families aren't aware this is offered to them and available to them. And then local developmental preschool intake contacts, which is a huge resource. Okay, last, we're almost done here. Sorry, guys. Some of my favorite books is the Dragon book series. It has, I think, like 60 or 70 books, but it's all about this cute little dragon and his friend and how he manages anger, following the rules, being social, not being a bully, like all sorts of behaviors. So, and it's all done through these books. A lot of times they'll read them at school, but I think it's great to read them at home as well and talk about what is Dragon doing that he shouldn't be doing. And I also think it's a good opportunity to bring up an example of, remember how earlier today you got really angry? This sounds like our dragon friend. What are some things you could have done differently? Good parent resources, Parenting from the Inside Out, Parenting with Love and Logic, The Whole Brain Child. Love these books. How to Talk So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. This is fantastic for a little bit older adolescent, pre-adolescent age population. Practical Parenting from Birth to 6 Years is a fantastic book. I'm sure most people have heard of 1, 2, 3 Magic. Fantastic way to work on discipline skills with your neurotypical child. I do think it's important to keep in mind if you have a child who is 6 but is functioning more like a 3-year-old, you're going to have to use resources and recommendations for kids who are younger, not necessarily their chronological age. These new books I just came across, Everyone Feels Angry Sometimes, Everyone Feels Anxious Sometimes, and Everyone Feels Sad Sometimes. Fantastic illustration written by psychologist Dr. Daniela Owen, and also talks about how to manage some of these feelings. Parenting children with health issues and special needs, The Child with Special Needs and Positive Discipline for Children with Special Needs, I think is really important because it talks about those nuances and working with kids who have neurodevelopmental disabilities. Defiant Child. So Russell Barkley is a psychologist that I talked to you about earlier, who talks about catching kids being good, which is so important. Even as an adult, don't you like it when your boss or a colleague even catches something randomly nice that you did? It makes you feel good. Same thing with kids. And I know we're not face-to-face, so we can't do any questions, but I encourage you to reach out to the coordinators for the ARC of Virginia. And if you have any questions, you are more than welcome to contact them, and they can send me a message, and I will be more than happy to try to help in any way that I can. And thank you all for joining me. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day, and I look forward to meeting you all in person sometime. Thank you. Bye.